And so good morning and welcome to Women Who Rock Investigates. So this is a case study media where we get answers for those that are in America. We go in and we dig out the little hidden parts that perhaps maybe some are a little biased to talk about. And then of course, this is not a biased platform, but we do want to be able to share this information with Americans as to education today, as what our topic is about. And it's about specifically autism. This is something that gets little attention here in the South in regards to it. And we want to talk about it and we want to get some information. So we're going to welcome our panelists to the platform on today. And so we have with us, the first one is, of course, she has her own consulting coaching firm, and this is none other than Miss Janet Ferone. And so good morning, Janet, and welcome. We're welcome to have you with us on today.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Okay, and so we also have another educational pro that's in the studio with us, and she has her own business as well, an organization called Little Hands for Families. And so we want to welcome, and she's also a consultant as well. And we want to welcome Dr. AStacy Haynes with us this morning on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, wonderful. So first we're going to do a little introduction, and we're going to ask both of you all to share with the audience a little bit about you, and I guess some of the specifics as to why you got into education. So we're going to start with Janet. Tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and the purpose of the reason why you got into education and why it was so helpful to you.
Sure. I grew up actually in New York, went to New York City public schools, Brooklyn, New York. And then I had the idea that as a young feminist, I was not going to be a nurse or a teacher. That wasn't happening. And then the real world kicked in. I had my liberal arts degree and looking for jobs. And I started in a cerebral palsy school with physically handicapped. I was a substitute teacher aide, which is about as the lowest position. But I really loved it. I had initially thought about going into counseling, but I felt like I could really reach kids in the classroom who didn't want to go out to see the counselor. So I got a whole new view from being in the classroom. I went through most of, I was only a teacher for a short time, and the school I was at needed an administrator, and I became the special needs coordinator. But the bulk of my career was in the Boston public schools, 33 years. I was running programs for kids with different challenges, a lot of trauma, a lot of poverty. They were identified as emotionally disturbed, behaviorally disordered, but a lot of it was just, like I said, the trauma and living conditions. Toward the end of my career, I was asked to start a program for students with depression, anxiety, and suicide. And while I was at that school doing that, I took on the leadership of a program for students with autism. And I think a little bit different than Tennessee, Massachusetts has had a focus on autism. And after I left Boston, I had been doing consulting all along, but I was invited to two graduate schools of education, Lesley University and Curry College, where I'm a lecturer. And the courses I've been teaching the most are autism. We have an autism endorsement certificate at Curry College that folks who are already certified teachers are coming in to get that extra so that they could work with students with autism. And just in terms of my quick background, I have a master's degree in special education from Hofstra University in New York. And I recently, just last year, completed a certificate of advanced education leadership from Harvard University right here in the Cambridge area.
Okay, great, wonderful. So thank you for your introduction. So we're gonna go to Dr. AStacy. And so AStacy also has been a previous guest of ours back in 2020 on a different subject and topic. And so thank you for coming back with us on this one. And so tell us a little bit about you as well, AStacy, and I guess the purpose for you getting into Little Hands.
Sure. Again, starting off with wanting to work with children, I always tell folks I thought that I was going to go to medical school and be a pediatrician, but then I said, "Oh, that takes too long," and here I am doing 12 years of school. But I am a counseling psychologist by degree, and by license, I'm a licensed professional counselor here in New Jersey. About 16 years ago, we opened Little Hands Family Services. So I'm the clinical side. I work with families and youth who are autistic. And so a big part of what we're seeing pre and post COVID has been an increase in anxiety, but also more awareness of mental health. And so the needs right now for families are huge. I started in residential, my early experiences, worked in school settings, clinical supervision, even before becoming in private practice. I've been doing this again for the last 16 years. My background, my master's degree from Bowie State University, my doctorate degree from Argosy University, and currently, again, right now we focus mainly on providing mental health services, school supports, and the sense of helping with IEPs, establishing 504s, assisting parents with navigating the school piece for autistic students, but also using approaches that are evidence-based, like collaborative and proactive solutions to help families.
Okay, great. So we're going to first start off about what is autism, because sometimes we get autism confused with the conflict of ADHD. We try to compare it and contrast it to so many other types of elements because people do not actually generally know the knowledge actually of what autism is. And then we're going to talk about the stages, simply because of the fact now here in Tennessee, they have, and it may be nationally, they have prohibited, I guess, mental psychologists from identifying the levels. They have here in Tennessee states that is a form of discrimination if you put a child of autism on level 1, level 2, and level 3. So here in Tennessee, there is a lot of outcries here in our location simply because of the fact that we don't have the resources. There is not enough being said about autism. So that's the reason why we have you on the show today. You're the experts. So we're going to start with Janet, and tell us a little bit about autism and what it is.
Well, autism is described as a developmental disability, neurologically based, and it affects the processing of information. It affects language, social skills. There's a lot. The thing with autism in terms of the disabilities, it's probably the one that has most variation. You know, a learning disability, students are different, but they're in the same, you know, reversing letters, struggling with reading. Someone with autism can be non-speaking, or on the other end, they can be hyperverbal. They can be, you know, cognitively genius level or intellectually disabled. And to talk to the point about ADHD, the thing we know about autism is there's a lot of co-occurring conditions, mental health, as Dr. Stacy said, ADHD. So it's often very hard to really parse out what's doing what, but ADHD, mental health, seizure disorder, lots of different conditions that can occur with autism. They don't have to, but, and I think with the diagnosis, you know, it's not like diabetes. You take the blood test, you have a number, you're either diabetic or you're not. So autism is very subjective. And I do a lot of work on, I'm getting ahead of myself, but on sort of the cultural impact. You know, the white, blonde suburban boys get the diagnosis. The our Black males, they're getting diagnosed with behavior disorder, even though they have autism. The bias that's seen, there's so much that goes into it. Even our females, they get diagnosed with depression and anxiety when maybe the proper diagnosis is autism. So it's a really not, it's very complicated, very complex, and so many factors are working on it, not just the views of those doing the diagnosing, but even the way families, a lot of times families don't want to say that they're seeing these types of symptoms or behaviors. Culturally, my husband's family is Indian. You don't talk about that. You keep it hidden because no one's going to marry your daughter if they think there's bad blood. So it's just such a wide, I've gone through, and for example, the Somali culture, they don't identify developmental milestones. Like we have our charts when you have a baby. Oh, they didn't do this by this age. Oh, he's not talking. Oh, where's the teeth? They have a very different view. So when they go into a psychologist and they're asked that question, how did he meet the milestones? And it's a different language. So there's so much that goes into a diagnosis and getting the proper services.
Okay, absolutely. So Stacy, could you kind of, I guess, piggyback on that since, you deal with the little hands, you have the organization with the little hands, and could you, in your perspective, to be able to also add a little bit to that as well, as far as, and like Janet said, sometimes it can be kind of difficult. It has so many components to autism and what have you. And I feel that sometimes it may be kind of a little confusing and distractive to some educators as well as the people who are trying to fund, in certain jurisdictions, they have to fund it. So it was like, okay, what is autism? What do you need this grant for? What do you need this occupational therapist for? What do you need this speech therapist for? He knows how to talk, but they don't see the other components that they're talking, but they have other issues as well that may contrast with autism.
Sure. And one thing that Janet said, so autism is a spectrum disorder, right? And so when I talk to families, we do have assessment tools that can assess. So even pediatricians now are being screened to assess for the two main things that we say make someone autistic. When you think about autism, you're thinking, first of all, about social communication and social deficits. Right. And so being able to understand sarcasm and jokes, being able to interact with people around you. Some people are very social, but yet they have poor boundaries, right? So this is that little kid that's in everyone's space that doesn't have, they're social, they want people to talk to them. And so we do have to change what people understand about autism, because you could have a kid, for example, with food sensitivity that doesn't eat much, and then you have a kid that eats everything in their parents' home, right? So the idea of autism, there's two components. There's the social piece and social deficits. There's also the inflexibility and rigidness and repetitive behaviors. And so those two things we begin to screen and look at, where is this youth having challenges, for example, in routine and structure. It used to be, we would say, an assessment piece, kids not answering to their name, right? They're so focused on what they're doing that they don't answer to their name. Now we understand that more of a social processing moment, and that kids aren't actually processing that piece that, hey, I am a person, right? That's my name. I just want to share, in addition to being a therapist, my nephew is autistic. And so one of the early signs, even at 8 to 9 months, we start to see kids not responding to facial expressions. We start to say, if a baby's not smiling, if they're not giving you the body language back, that reciprocal moment that we see in social exchange and social interaction. People sometimes say, oh, they were such a quiet baby. Be careful of that, right? A good baby, right? Oh, they're such a good baby. Well, we have early screening methods that we can say, even in infancy, whether or not a child should be receiving, for example, early intervention services, because these symptoms of autism, although there is a spectrum, there are early warning signs that we are looking for in youth and even toddlers. Parents that say, oh, it's just a difficult 2-year-old. Well, there's a big difference when that 4-year-old is still very difficult, right? Routine and structure. If you change something, that kid has a meltdown, has a hard time. So that inflexibility and rigidness, we really begin to look at whether it's developmentally appropriate for that youth, or at 4 and 5, for example, even being able to follow along with the school program, right? We start to see these types of things. And so we in the mental health field, we are teaching clinicians to use screening assessment tools. And so there are plenty out there for folks to use, but also sending families to early intervention, especially if their youth is before 3, because we do want to catch it as early as possible.
Absolutely. Okay, and so here's the next question, and we're going to start with Janet. And what you said, Stacy, is so I guess prevalent. Sometimes when we're in, we mistake it. Oh, he's so quiet and what have you. And so we want to talk about that a little bit too, because sometimes we find parents where they're in a little denial as well. I have a son. He'll be 29 next year. He overcame this disease. He did, but he had strong occupation, and I had to roll my sleeves up too, and I had to go to work too at home, because it's not all the responsibility on the teacher. The parent has to come in as well. So we want to talk about that a little bit, to be able to bring some, but to kind of help parents to be able to come out of this shell, because a lot of times we may know, but we don't want to know. I was like that before too. I have a grandson as well. He's autistic as well. And so sometimes parents are in denial. You say anything to them and things, they get defensive, aggressive, because you're just trying to help them to be able to understand. Just like my family tried to help me to understand, look, this child has a problem. He's 2 years old. You need to get up and you need to get him some help. But we want to talk about that and try to give some insight as to how mothers can be able to come out of denial. Sometimes we get it confused, back years ago, they used to use the word retarded. And of course, we can't use that word today. That's basically like, it's a word of defense. But an autism child is not retarded. It's just they have mental neurology type of effects. So talk to us, Janet, about that, how women or mothers can be able to, and look, some fathers, we're going to talk about that too. Some fathers, now I didn't go through this one, but I've seen it through some other cases. I'm serious, where the fathers get very, very defensive with the mothers, because, hey, look, you're in here babyifying this child. I can't handle this. I can't cope with this. I don't know how to deal with this. This is your child, but it's both of y'all's child. But then when he finds out the child is autistic, now it's the mother's child. And so we want to talk about that. We want to talk about these little gray areas in the home, helping mothers to come out of this mental thought that, there's nothing wrong with him. He's gonna, because that's what we heard when we have a nephew too. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was the same way too. He ain't nothing wrong with him. Oh, he's gonna talk and think. And sometimes mothers be in so much denial. But then here's the husband too, the father. He can't cope with the child because the mother is not sharing with him that something is wrong with both of their children. I mean, both of their son or their daughters. So talk to us a little bit about that. Janet, if you have, seen that, before and experienced that before and what have you in Massachusetts.
I mean, I think it's universal. You have, there's a pregnancy or an adoption, there's a child coming into your life, and you have this image in your head of how wonderful and all the things they're going to achieve and getting the awards for being the best, in the honor roll, you have that.
Right.
So when things are looking like it's not happening that way, it's human nature to go into a bit of denial.
Okay.
And last night, I had mentioned to you earlier, I teach a college course on autism, which is on Monday night. And I had invited a parent to come and be a guest speaker to talk about the parent perspective. And she's a very unusual woman. She adopted 9 children from Colombia, not all at once, but they had gone through a very abusive, traumatic birth situation. And 8 of them are 8 out of 10. She also adopted a grandchild. 8 out of 10 are on IEPs, some autism, some psychosis, a whole lot of stuff.
Okay.
But we were talking about how just the dynamic you said about, the dads are like, you're babying him, he just needs some discipline and, like that, stop babying him. So it really is very difficult at a young age. And if it's your first child, you're not really sure, is this okay? Is this not okay? But I think the moms always have that nagging, call it mom's intuition.
Right.
That's something, I think deep down, you do know. I mean, just what Dr. Stacey was saying about the eye contact, the cooing, the, you smile, the baby smiles, like even if you're not fully aware, you just know it's not quite feeling right.
Right.
And I think the earlier that children get involved in perhaps a daycare or a preschool, and having a trusted adult or an agency, having them really be the person that gives you the feedback. And, if you have a trusting relationship, you're more likely to hear it. We also talked about families being able to get together and, really talk about it, because there is so much stigma. I talked about, all the different cultures. But one of the things last night I had shared from a previous class, and one of my students did a beautiful graphic on it. Have you heard the term refrigerator mom?
No.
So what years ago, there was a psychologist, very well known, Bruno Bettelheim, and he came up with this theory that autism was caused because the moms were cold and unfeeling, and all they were doing was providing the care, like food from a refrigerator.
Okay.
And that was a prevalent view from the 60s to the 80s by a world-renowned psychologist.
Okay.
So even though it's been debunked, there is that, I'm a mom. When your kid doesn't do well, you take it as a personal wound that, I must have done something wrong as a mom. The dads get a bit of a pass, but it really is coming back on the mom. So it's very complicated. It's very complicated. But the more I know, in Massachusetts now, everyone by 24 months, if you go to a pediatrician, there's screening.
Okay.
There's brochures, there's, presenting information here, here's a packet of information, and it gives you, look for these signs. So the more information people can get, the more normalized that we can be. You're sharing openly with us about your child, about your nephew. There are some people who, we could be having a discussion about autism and they're tight-lipped and not sharing because, there has been so much of that, stigma. Some of the Asian religions, folks feel like karma. I did something bad in a previous life. This is what I got. There's so much out there that does make it hard to really be open.
Wow. Okay, Stacy. Wow.
Sure. And one of the things with autism, when we say the word autism, many of us visualize non-speaking, flapping, banging their head. We don't visualize the engineer that's in a computer job in the apartment by themselves with friends on their own. And so parents go through this, first of all, we have to stop calling it a disability, right?
Right.
There's a huge movement within the autistic community that there's neurodiversity, right? Our brains are different. I've written 2 children's books even about this idea of the neurodiverse universe, right? There's no one normal brain. And so a lot of autistic families are saying, hey, listen, we need to make sure people understand that this isn't about a disability. It's about our abilities being different.
Right.
And everyone has different abilities, again, on this spectrum.
Wow.
But parents do lose the idea, as Janet was saying, it's a grieving process, right? You hear the word autism. And so typically when I see a family, we do an initial meeting, we do a screening, and then I have a parent meeting for the exact reason we're talking about right now. I pull mom, dad, partners, everyone, whoever's involved in that child's life, and I say, here's the diagnosis. Now let's understand what that means for your child. It may not look like your neighbor who's nonverbal. Your child's speaking. Your child's in general education classes. Your child, yes, still struggles with social moments and repetitive behaviors or anxiety, but that looks different for your child. And so a big part of really teaching and helping parents, I think, is when we get an early diagnosis. And as Janet said, the earlier we can get that diagnosis and then now supply them with what images of autistic people look like. I hate to joke, but I always tell my parents, the Big Bang Theory, right? The TV show. and maybe being a scientist, cool. But again, even the idea of some say, hey, there's autism in that show too, right? And autistic characteristics. And
Right.
that's what we need to do in our artistic community is help parents to see the abilities of their kids, not the disabilities.
Right. Stacy, I agree with that. I'm telling you, when I first removed myself from the I guess pity, a lot of times we want the pity, want somebody to pat us on the back or what have you. And then once I took him to school, got him diagnosed in this program. I think that I was living in a different location at the time. And so what happened was it was a grant that came in to the school and was able to have professionals to be able to come in, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and what have you, to work with him. But then I thought about it. So they gave me this little booklet or pamphlet or something like that, and I threw it in the garbage. I'm like, no, this is no disability. We're going to work on this. We're going to see if you can be able to talk. We're going to do whatever we need to do. And then of course the school came in and said, look, you're going to have to roll your sleeves up at home. We're doing it at school. You're going to have to roll your sleeves up at home. And so I never did want to rely on the government funding I wanted to see what I could be able to do along with the school to be able to, and today, okay, when he was in school, he was on a roll all the way straight out. He got his own job today. He had his own apartment and things like that. He got his own family and what have you. And so a lot of times individuals feel that this is something that lasts with a child until 50, 60 years old, depending on the type of help. I think the more help, and these autistic occupational therapists, they were aggressive in this classroom and what have you. And like I was thinking the other day, I'm like, if I could find them, because I think I still have his progress report 30 years later. If I could find them, I swear I would take them out for a dinner or what have you, but that is very, very important. We don't sit there and just say, well, I don't want him to learn or I don't want her to learn. We're going to take the disability effect. No, he's not disabled. He can learn. And so once they gave me that diagnosis or that prognosis, after they went in there and they put him on a tape recorder and they went in there and did their initial take with him and things, yeah, he's going to be able to talk. We're going to work this out. And so I'm so thankful and grateful for that. And so even for parents that feel that it's more about the government money, I mean, I'm sorry about that. No, you have to, if you want the child to be able to be successful with whatever diagnosis, and every child may not be like that. And we're going to go to that next question about those who live with autism as adults. I interviewed somebody on the podcast back here in 2014, and she was like, oh, I was diagnosed with autism back in the 70s. I'm like, what? I always thought it was a child's issue. And it's not. So if either one of you, I know you deal with little hands, Dr. Stacy, but Janet, if you can comment on that, that's fine. But Janet, kind of talk to us a little bit about that, about those that are coping with autism and they're grown adults.
Sure. The work that I've done, the students that I worked with primarily were 14 to 21-year-olds. So I wasn't with the little hands, I was with the big hands. So I'm used to the adult community, but one of the things that I've really similar to, I really appreciated Dr. Stacy saying about the autistic voices telling us things. I feel like when I started with my college courses and did a lot of work to research what I could present and different angles, I found a whole world of autistic adults on TikTok, on the social media platforms. There are so many autistic content creators that are talking about, from their perspective, what it was like. Some of the practices that are very considered like tried and true, for example, ABA. A lot of autistic folks are like, hey, I consider that torture. I consider that abuse. To me as a person, you're trying to, beat the autism out of me, more or less. But in terms of adults, one of the things I did during the pandemic, when I was home in this very office, I was watching, it was, the pandemic, George Floyd, things were just unfolding. I was watching lots of webinars on civil rights, on autism, on, different things. And I kept emailing my friend, hey, look at this. Then I would send this to somebody else. You should check this out. And I was getting myself a little crazy. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try a Facebook group. So I started a Facebook group called E2 Equity Educators, sharing all kinds of resources for all marginalized groups, including neurodiverse, disabled, race, gender, sexuality, everything. And I wound up with, since I'm working in autism, posting things about that, I've met adults through that group who have talked about getting an adult diagnosis, that they went through life sort of feeling like they just were not like everyone else, but didn't really know. There was one woman who said, back to the repetitive and predictability, elementary school, every morning at 10 o'clock, they used to go sit on the rug for a little math lesson and then go back to their seats. Clock hit 10, little girl got up, went and sat on the rug. She didn't know that the schedule was changed. Mm-hmm. And the teacher was, like, what are you doing? What are you doing over there? We're not doing that. And she said like that haunted her. She couldn't figure out what was, her world was kind of shattered. But there's so many people now, particularly because I think of that, the advocacy of the autistic community and the exposure that they're getting. But a lot of times it's hard to get diagnosed as an adult, and particularly as an adult female. It's supposed to be identified by age 3. Your parents may be gone. You may have grown up in foster homes. You don't have access to that. But what's become very important in the adult autistic community is the value of self-diagnosis. I have a woman that I met, again, through my Facebook group, who is self-diagnosed autistic. She went in for an evaluation. The psychologist said to her, I agree with you. I think you are autistic, but based on our screening tools, I cannot give you an official diagnosis.
Wow.
It was an interesting thing. But I think also what happens is people have learned to compensate. And also when we're talking about such a spectrum, if folks are conversing, making eye contact, there is a bias like, oh, they can't possibly be autistic. So I think that, messes up the diagnoses. But there's so much out there of autistic supporting each other. And, on the course that I teach, I have a little meme. Autism is not a processing error. It's just a different operating system. So a lot of people are, using that. But on the other side, there's a lot of people saying, hey, we don't want to get rid of the word disability because that's how we get the funding for our special education services, for our occupational therapy, for our physical therapy, speech. So there's kind of two camps on that. There's also, I know a lot of moms of very involved kids with very serious behaviors who are saying, that's all well and good that you're using this language, but do you know what my life is like on a daily basis? I'm getting hit, I'm getting bit, I'm getting, don't try to say that this isn't a disability because I'm drowning here and nice language isn't going to make my life better. So there, again, a spectrum, and there's so much variation in all aspects of it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Stacy, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I just want to add about the late diagnosis. So our research shows that girls in particular are late diagnosed, usually middle school by 7th, 8th grade. And so I do want to caution parents too. We think about when they're younger, right? Girls, oh, they're just a shy girl, they're just quiet. And
Absolutely.
then when they get to middle school, they start having social issues. Oh, it's just girl drama. I can tell you these are those warning signs that we have to pay attention to. And so it does lead to that issue of late diagnoses. A lot of adults are self-diagnosing, but you also can go to a licensed clinician that can help you to go back through. Like I've even gone through school reports. I've gone through even notes from teachers, parent reports. I had an adult the other day. Even the parent was sitting there going through the experiences from childhood now to help with that adult diagnosis and to confirm that. And so again, balancing the self-report of the adult that's always felt different, you can also then bring in that parent component. The other thing that we're seeing, even in corporate America, we have human resource departments that now have neurodiversity training, right? And so I know particularly my husband's in computers and project management, and they had a program where they brought in individuals to train these supervisors and managers how to work with a diverse neuro population, right? So whether that's
Wow.
ADHD, autism, these are things that we're seeing even in corporate America, because when we talk about adults with autism, right? So we think about part of the diagnosis is autistic individuals focus, right? So maybe they're into computers. Well, they're going to be great at that, but they might not be the best help desk person, right? But they might be a great coder or programmer, or they may not like that side of it and just want to fix problems. And so that becomes even in the workplace to say the social skill deficits, that social piece is
Okay.
something that we're teaching typicals to be able to work with even in work environments, because those are the challenges that we continue to see within adulthood. Many adults, autistic adults, will be participating. I know there's a huge gaming community online. I always say, like people find themselves, right? So in any community, even with online gaming, things like Dungeons and Dragons, I hate to say, even creative and acting. Believe it or not, a lot of autistic adults love acting and theater. And you're
Right.
like, but they're not social. What's that about? It's a script, and it gives them a sense of belonging. There's an
Yeah.
acceptance and love even in artistic and creative cultures, right? So again, we see adults thriving, but even as Janet said earlier, it's important to identify those skills and the supports. And if we can get that early on and then recognize, instead of taking that super focus as a negative, how do we channel that into a strength? How do we channel that maybe sometimes into a career? And so those are things that even our high school programs, our transitional programs are making sure that we do to help support autistic adults.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. That is totally, totally awesome. New Jersey and Massachusetts. That's where you want to be for learning. Okay.
Well, we have the highest rates, just so you're aware. New Jersey, we have the highest rates in the country. So we're the state was probably the
Wow.
smallest, but the highest rates. And so we're not where we need to be. But again, the research is out there. And so, yeah, being able to help parents is.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the parental side of it, and then we've talked about the adult side of it. Now we want to go inside of the classroom without being, I guess, highly opinionated about some things, but we want to be able to help the parents to be able to know how to address it, know how to address it. So here we have Tennessee Autism Speak. So of course, in this group on Facebook, they have tons of groups. There is not a lot that's going on here in this state in regards to that. So happened, when 30 years ago, my son got an opportunity to get in with a grant with the school, and because they saw that the number was increasing in regards to autism. But today we still are wrestling with some issues, in the state. And so we want to talk about that as to how parents can be able to reach out. I don't know. I don't know if it's advocate. I think October is Autism Speak Month or something like that. I know they have a 5K walk. I mean, we can do all of these walks, but we have to be able to have something to take to the classroom and take home as well. So I'm going to give you, I guess, an example. I think this mother was, I guess, berating on the group as to she contacted the school. And once she contacted the principal, you know, my son is 3 years old and he'll be 4 next year. We wanted to know what type of resources that you all have. The school did not have any resources, and the principal was arrogant and irate with the parent. So how do we, you know, and people, you know, parents are very defensive to their children. They already know their children have an issue and they want everybody to understand that. So how do we go beyond that? Or how does a parent go beyond that? My children are in their 30s, Lord, please help me. But how does parents now that have children, they're irate, and I think that's what she said too. She said her child was 3 years old, and he was irate too. But how do they find the resources if it's not being offered in their district? What do they do? I mean, it's like the parent is in somewhat of a cage, so to speak, because they don't know where to go to get the resources. They can't come to New Jersey or Boston to be able to get the information because they're in another district, different state, or what have you. How do they address that? How do they address that with the principal? And how does the principal supposed to see? Because we have different acts, Individual Educational Disability Act. And of course, once you unlock that, there are a whole lot of resources there to be able to combat with the school. But then, you know, then you're gonna have to go back and look at that teacher too. Look, I contacted this investigator because you did not let me in or let my child in. So we want to kind of talk about that, if that's a preference for both of you all, because we're trying to, like I said, we're trying to get answers out there for these parents. They're going through things, and some schools do not want to accept these children, especially if the parent have sat there perhaps maybe 2 or 3 years and allowed them to kind of, you know, do whatever they want to and eat whatever they want to. And sometimes they were like, okay, we don't want to be bothered with your child because the child is not trained or behavioral trained or what have you. And so now the parent is suffering at home because the school, that's what's going on here in Tennessee. I'm just being honest with you. That's what's going on here. We got all the signs up to Tennessee Autism Speaks, but there is nothing that's going on the inside of the classroom. They put all of them in the same classroom together. Down syndrome, autism, if they're in a wheelchair, all of them gets put in the same classroom. I don't understand, as I was telling, reaching out to our principal in regards to our grandson, I was like, how is that going to be effective for the child if they are all in the same classroom? One is walking, one is not. One is talking, one is not. One is verbal, one is not. One knows how to run, the other one does not. And because of the resources being limited, the child suffers at the same time too. So we're going to start with Janet. I know that's a lot to unpack and what have you, but it's just something that is going on here in our state, and they don't have a big, huge red sign up to say, okay, we got all of this, we got all of that, we got the 5K walk, we got all of this, but when it comes to the specific need of autism, there's not enough.
Wow. That's kind of a heartbreaking decision. And as I was saying earlier to you, you know, Massachusetts, we're not perfect, but in terms of education, certainly miles ahead.
Yeah.
I think what's difficult is that, number one, the parents are overwhelmed. They're, you know, caring for the child at home, that, you know, a lot of effort goes into that. They're exhausted. But what's so important is for parents to know their rights under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's federal legislation. So even though they may be doing better in Massachusetts than Tennessee, we're all operating under the same law.
Right.
Autism is one of the federal disability definitions. This is where the word, as I was saying earlier, you kind of want the word because that's how you get the services. But I think it's very hard for an isolated parent to know, you know, how to advocate. Again, going back to our discussion, they might be embarrassed of their child's behavior. So, but what, you know, one of the things, hopefully the pediatrician and that office can assist, particularly, I know the parent last night was saying, make sure you get a developmental pediatrician if you
Oh,
have
wow.
an autistic student, a
Okay.
child. So that person would be in a much better place to advise and give resources around the school. There are also advocacy groups that provide an advocate to go into the school with you, free of charge or sliding scale, depending on the parent income. The schools also are required to have what's called a SPED PAC, a special education parent advisory council. Whether they do or don't, if no one knows to ask for it and fight for it, they may, and some schools do it so poorly that no one shows up and they say, well, we held the meeting, so we're legally, off the hook.
Wow.
But yeah, but I mean, hopefully if students are going through preschool, and if early intervention kicks in, that's a way of getting help when you transition into the school. But I can say this, but I'm not reaching maybe the parents who need to hear it. But the child has the right to be served in the least restrictive environment. So the general education class, the regular class with everyone else, is the first line of defense. Can you, bring in the services, the speech and the OT and the PT? Can you, maybe they just get pulled out a little bit for some one-to-one intensive work, but they're in the classroom. What we're doing in Massachusetts and what I teach a lot of is universal design for learning, where we're modifying the classroom, offering different ways of getting information, such as videos or audiobooks, not just for the special education children, but making it available to all. So, a lot of times it's not so much the autism, but that the setting doesn't accommodate the autism. You can have someone, you can have someone who's in a wheelchair approach a building. They can't get in their steps.
Right.
It's not their disability, it's the building. If there was a ramp, they're getting in. So if we can have access points for all students, and I know this is a big step from what you're describing.
You're fine.
Yeah. But again, having what we've done a lot in with autism in the past was a behavior chart and, a reward, a consequence. And while some of that can be effective, I think what people really need to switch the thinking is, this is not a willful behavior. This is not someone saying, I don't like that teacher, I want to be disrespectful. This is someone with a processing disorder. The sensory, we haven't really gotten into sensory needs of kids with autism. There's a videos that I show my college students where the lights, the sound, just the hum of a fluorescent light can sound like a jet engine in your head. And we don't see that. We have neurotypical people have the ability to notice there's a buzz and then listen to the teacher, and the buzz is put out of our mind. Kids with autism, things are coming at them. Smells. I always remember the school I last worked at, the day they had chili, that onion smell. I'd walk in the morning, but then I adjusted. But the kid with autism is that all they can think about is the smell.
Right.
So really adapting the classroom. Is there a calming corner? Do they have sensory fidget toys? Do they have maybe a band on their chair so they can kick the rubber band and not kick the chair in front of them?
Okay.
There's so many accommodations that also help, like the ADHD kid, the movement. So I feel like we're really trying to move away from that sort of reward consequence, because you're punishing a kid for something they're not capable of doing. And really quickly, I do want to point out that when it sounds like Autism Speaks is the resource you have in your area, but there's a very negative impression of Autism Speaks in the autistic community. It's
Wow.
very much an organization that the autistic individuals that I know want nothing to do with. So just
Wow.
want to mention that.
My mouth is closed. Okay, go ahead,
No,
Stacy.
I'm not telling you. I just want to, Stacy, it looks like you're
Yeah,
nodding.
Janet, I was gonna say, and so I'm gonna quietly nod that that's how people feel in New Jersey. One, and
Wow.
Diane, like you said, part of the challenge is it's great to do fundraising, but right, families need practical solutions. They need
Yeah.
resources in their day-to-day. I do want to just, and bear with me for about 3 minutes here. I
Yes, go
want to
ahead.
go back to something in that case study that's about the age of that child, right? So a 3-year-old, I just want to, one of the challenges, there's this age gap, right? So if you go to your pediatrician with your 24-month-old who's now 2, they're going to tell you, hey, if they're not speaking, if you're concerned about social or developmental issues, early intervention, get it now. Because by the age of 3, you're no longer able to access early intervention. And
Mm,
so we have this gap in our communities, right, between 3 and 5.
right.
Without being able to access early intervention, getting those early assessments, we're not able to then be a part of, for example, preschool disabled preschool settings, right? And so we have families that are struggling. Their kids are getting put out of preschool settings, daycare settings, because the services were not accessed before the age of 3. I know here in New Jersey, we're doing a lot to put in services. For example, here at Little Hands Family Services, we actually have social skills. 3 and 4-year-olds actually make up my wait list now. It used to be teenagers, right, coming in for mental health. Now it's the littles for social skills, managing emotions, things like that. But I do want to take a second to go back to the process for that parent.
Okay.
So one of the things we talk about the IDEA, like Janet said, we have federal law, but not every autistic youth needs an individual education plan. And so schools will talk about qualifications, right? So I say to parents, let's say you do get into school, your kid's in kindergarten. Even I had kids on the first day that I see here. One was suspended the first day of school. He told a peer he's going to stab him with a fork because they were talking too much, not following the classroom rules, right? So rules are a big thing for some of our autistic youth. I had another little one that was running out of the classroom and kicking people. So what I typically will tell parents is, again, as Janet said, let them experience the general education setting. And I know it's difficult to get phone calls home. I know it's difficult to hear your child's being disruptive, but what you're starting to do is talk about how does the disability impact academics? That's what's going to get you an educational plan in school. Having autism, for example, I have many autistic students that are in general education. They're actually in the honors math classes. They're in AP sciences. They are bright. So they don't qualify for special education. And that's something that we really have to make sure parents understand when they go to a school for an evaluation.
Okay.
The school is focused on educational needs of your child, not mental health and behavioral concerns. And so even a student with ADHD, you could have a student, for example, with diabetes that has an IEP, an individual education plan. But what we have to prove, which parents have a hard time with that word, is that their disability impacts their academics. And so a 504 is a civil rights law, right? It says, hey, anybody with a disability cannot be discriminated against. And so I find families with autistic students do great if their kid has a 504 because they don't qualify for special education. Their kid doesn't need modification of the schoolwork. They can do the schoolwork as their peers. However, this peer might need the headphones during testing time. This youth might need to be able to have an aid at lunch because recess is hard to manage the social moments that become difficult. Or the student might need an intervention that might be a checklist or an organizer that helps them when they're doing math problems or writing prompts, right? So again, we do have 2 plans, and I think that's very important for parents to understand that you can have a 504 and your child is not in special education. Your child's in that general education classroom with supports based on that disability, or your child could be in a special education program, an inclusive classroom, a smaller setting classroom. And then one last thing that Janet and Diane, you pointed out is having kids with multiple disabilities, right? Some of our schools do not have the resources to have classrooms just for autistic students or classrooms just for medically disabled. And so, yes, we do see kids with different disabilities placed in that classroom setting together. What I find for my speaking autistic children, and so parents, if your child has got language and is speaking, I say start them in kindergarten like any other kid and see what they're capable of and what becomes the challenges. Then you now have the teacher helping you to advocate for a plan. And once you have an educator on your side as a parent, again, I'm on the outside counseling side. I'm not in the schools. I used to be as a guidance counselor, but anyway,
Okay.
that's the hard part. That's the hard part, right? Getting the school. But once you have a school teacher and an educator helping you provide documentation saying these are the things we see, it's usually easier to navigate those processes. The 504 plan is done at the school level. So that's with the principal, nurses, teachers. That's a committee that meets. The IEP is done through your child study team, special services departments. And so those are two different entities within schools. Most schools, the child study team doesn't handle the 504s, they separate them out. And the 504s, you can even start that process with your school. And so I tell that parent of the 3-year-old, that is the challenge. Principals as well, sometimes, believe it or not, are not as versed on the process, even in their own districts, how to support families. And so I say, it's hard to be patient and wait, but even getting that teacher, that first educator to see the same thing you're seeing is really important to start that process in this.
Wow, that is a load. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That is so great because like I said, it's sometimes the parents don't even know that they have, and they have to go to social media networking sites, which that's also good too. You know, you get in there with other people, share different things. My child is this, or my adult brother is this, or what have you. And so they're helpful and they're supportive, but you would think also that it should be more in the school system, you know, as well, to be able to go to them. And as you stated, IEP, sometimes you have some certain jurisdictions where I guess the 504 plan is included with the IEP too. Okay, so that's a different. So,
And that's all
Makes
the
sense,
resources.
but
Yeah, but Janet, and one thing that Janet said, again, even this idea of looking at the federal law, right? And so parents, every school district is required to post on their district websites and district resources the special education rights, right? So parents' special education rights. There is a pamphlet and booklet by federal law that is supposed to be accessible to every parent with a child in public school districts. And so these are resources, again, you can ask your school district for, because by law, they're required to give that information to you as well. It tells you your rights, it tells you the process, it tells you, again, how to navigate getting your child the support that they need.
okay, go ahead, Janet.
And well, on just piggybacking, since we're on the parents' rights, a very basic right is if you say to the school, I suspect my child has a disability and I want an evaluation, they have to do that special education evaluation. They can't say to you, we don't think so. Nah, he looks good. She's fine. They have to send a consent home within 5 days for the parent to sign off on the assessments, federal law. So the hard part is reaching the parents who don't know this.
Oh, it's going to be it's going to be on Roku and Amazon, and it's going to be on all the major podcasts. So trust me, it's going to get out there.
Okay, yeah. And you know, even just the parent that I had at my college class last night, she brought her child, autistic boy when he was younger, to it was a preschool class.
Mm-hmm.
And he, you know, we haven't talked that much about it, but one of the things of autism is the self-stimming, the flapping, the toys, the fidgets, the, you know, repetitive behaviors. So he had 2 snakes that his thing was to twirl the snakes. He went into a classroom to, she was looking at a classroom for him. The teacher looked, the woman said, oh no, I'll break him of that in 2 days. And the parent said, thank you very much, goodbye, and left. Went to another classroom, and this is Boston, we're a big city. There's, more options. I know some places you go to the neighborhood school and you're done. But she said the next teacher they met was a male teacher, and kid went in with the snakes, and this teacher got a shoebox, made a little bed and a little home for the snakes, and said to the child, while you're doing your schoolwork, the snakes will rest. They'll take their nap, and then they'll be ready to play with you when it's recess time and lunchtime. So just her highlighting how these two teachers dealt with, and that's what I'm talking about modifying the environment rather than we're gonna, and I think, like I said earlier, the idea was, oh, we don't want that kid with this, looking different than regular kids. So we're going to break that habit. But what I've heard again and again from autistic individuals is breaking their habits of, don't flap. They could not pay attention to the math because their energy was going to, I got to keep my hands because I'm going to lose my privileges if I start flapping. No one's learning math or English or science because it's a biological need to, self-soothe or to deal with the sensory. So I think, and this is a hard one, I think a shift from the teachers, but they're also, I worked for 33 years in Boston with teachers. They're working very hard. They have multiple needs. They have kids not speaking English. They have kids, as Stacy pointed out, the mental health challenges after the pandemic have skyrocketed, learning disabilities, everything, kids coming in hungry, kids, lost a parent to COVID and they're, so, I feel like I'm really appreciative of my work that I was saying, I'm getting way more calls. Can you train our staff on autism? I did a whole school training in the spring at a charter school. And then by August, they said, you know what, that was, the staff really liked it and they want more. Can you come back? And last week I did the whole school. So just giving, just that, I love that example of the snakes. And I had the student in high school, which is how I know the parent. And those snakes came to high school. I know those, they're green. I was friends with them because that boy had those. But who cares? Who cares? Why are we, judging? If this helps,
Right.
We all, I think we all have a little bit of, we twirl our hair if we're a little anxious, or, there's like little things. This is just
Right.
on a bit of a bigger scale.
Right.
But yeah, so I think, getting the schools to change, getting the schools to adapt. And, even though kids need the structure, it's that rigidity around, no toys, no this, no that,
Right.
and making it, the classroom accepting of differences. How, that's a tall order, but I'm hoping we're moving in that direction.
Okay. And so that's great. And thank you so much, because our grandson, what he does, he has like a, I don't care if it's a string or whatever, he just twirls it, and that kind of gets him that I don't know what it is I don't know, it energizes him, that fulfills him. And so that's what we do. We give him something, if it's a little toy or something where it can flop around and stuff like that. You can't take it until he can be able to, I guess, learn better. I guess they have different behavioral patterns, as they grow and what have you. And so this is going to be the last question for the both of you, and it's going to be a little challenging. So if you don't want to answer it, you're more than welcome to pass it to the next speaker. So we just come out of a dilemma with one of the children. I'll just put it like that. And so we want to talk about the fact of the training, because I know you touched on that just a little bit a second ago, Janet, about the training, about the school. Does the school have the training? And so they had to keep the child out for almost a year back and forth without any education. No, we're going to talk about it. I don't care. We're going to talk about it. Kept them out. You go to school, you know, just like when you go to school and stuff, long as you get there and you get your lunch and stuff like that, and the parent can come back and check them out, and they still can be able to be listed in the school registry as being attending for the full day. Well, with this situation, I'm not going to call out the school district. We're not going to call out the principal or anything. With this issue here, the educator was sending the child home it started off gradually 2 days a week, and then it started to happen every day. And so, of course, we had to get to the level where we had to go step it up, and we had to go to the IDEA. And of course, an investigator and all of that got involved and what have you. And so we want to talk about that. I know that the school has to have, if they have special needs resources on the grounds at that school in that particular district, I'm pretty sure there is more than just that special ed instructor is aware of the law. They were breaking it all around. And so what the investigator told us, said, you know, civil rights have been violated. And so we want to be able to bring resources. And I know you all have shared a tons, but then the parent don't know how to advocate for that element once it reaches to that stage. The principal was very, very arrogant. You know, trying to figure out, okay, we done told you what to do. The doctor said that you didn't have to send the child home. We put on a medication and what have you. And sometimes there are different periods where the child will get sick, but it's only at school. And sometimes the anxiety would run up and make him, you know, vomit and what have you and things like that. But it was just, I guess the depressing part was trying to get the school to understand. Here are professionals. And then once we reached out to them, here they go, well, you know, I have a wonderful staff and they're very highly educated and they know what they're doing. No, they didn't. I'm serious. They dropped the ball several times, went home ever since October 2021. And here we are in August and September 2022. We got to come up with a plan. We got to come up with a plan with the doctor. No, you're supposed to have the plan. You're the school, you're the educator. You're responsible by law for providing these things. And like I said, we're not here to badger, we're not here to judge. Sometimes it may be a lot on certain people's plates, but if it's the law, that's your responsibility to eat everything that's on that plate. If you are an educator or if you're a principal or something like that. And we felt so overwhelmed, me and the daughter did, because I did not know what to do until I went to the website. It's very, very important so you know your rights for your children, grandchildren, nephews, friends, cousins, colleagues, family members. And so if you all are comfortable to elaborate on that, the importance of the school district coming in there, knowing the rights, not violating the rights. And so we didn't take it to the next level because we wanted to give the school the opportunity to correct their error. They still did not admit no wrong. They
Wow.
kept, oh, we're this, we're that, we're this, we're that, we're this, and we're that. In my district, we don't do this. And it was just so much, and all of the blame was still put back on the parent. And it was as if, and these are special educational district supervisors, and they still did not take no thought to this. And that was very, very heartbreaking. So this last meeting, I'm like, oh no, we're not going here no more. I'm gonna take this hammer down just like Judge Judy, and I'm gonna slam it. The gavel comes down today. You're gonna stop this. You're gonna get back in your place. And so once we went in there and we started, start the ball to rolling, getting an investigator involved under the IDEA. Once they came in, that's when everything stopped. Oh, we didn't mean any harm, and all the kinds of, they even came to the house. They came to the house to even visit the child. The red carpet comes out. And so we want to talk about the importance of the parent knowing their rights and the importance of the teacher and the school district not violating the rights of the child. If that's comfortable for you all. Like I said, if you don't feel comfortable to answer it, you can pass it.
I'm itching to answer this. Comfortable. I'm ready to go. I am. I'm ready to show up at that school.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm assuming the child had an IEP and was identified as special education. Okay. So even though they think they're sending home, that is literally a suspension. You cannot send anyone out of the classroom, even to a room in the school, like an in-school suspension. Once you remove that child from their assigned classroom for 10 days in a school year, that's it. That's all you can do from a discipline standpoint. So what I'd be going for is compensatory services. You denied this child their education by having them leave the school. This investigator, I'm glad that I would not have had the patience. I would have been there. They are entitled to possibly, a tutor coming to the home to make up for the hours. Programming in the summer. For all those hours missed, there needs to be compensation, as they call it, compensatory services. There are, like I said, advocacy, special education advocacy groups. I don't know where they are in Tennessee or how many they are, but that is often a key piece. And, before it even got to having, once the things were not going well, the parent also has the right to call an IEP meeting to say the IEP clearly is not working. So we need another meeting. And again, the school has to give you that meeting. You can bring whoever you want to a meeting. You can bring your advocate. You can bring a lawyer. You can bring your best friend. You can bring a medical professional. What the school was saying about, the doctor, that might be a piece of it that can participate in the IEP meeting, but the onus is on the school to put together a program. And if the school...
So why, okay, I'm sorry. And I know we're supposed to be off here at 12:15. So let me ask you this. So why do some jurisdictions, we're not just going to pick, why do they act as if they're illiterate? Because the child was being sent home because he had a vomiting issue, not because he was irate, not because he was, he had issues going on. This was simply because of the fact he had a medical condition. Janet, can you hear me?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit,
okay.
But I'm just sorry that it went on for so long and that there wasn't an intervention because, and that's, if that's an anxiety, if that's a mental health issue, then number one, they need to have provisions at the school, be it a counselor, a calming place if the student is feeling overwhelmed. Maybe different modifications depending on the school. Okay. And the school nurse, normally, and I know when I talk to people, we've had great luck with our school nurses. Other schools say they, not so much. And the IEP team, if this is a constant problem, they need to say, well, we need some more evaluative information. Okay. We need a health assessment. We need, maybe a mental health evaluation. But to just, that's criminal. That is just criminal, sending this child out and then marking attendance for the full day. That's also fraud. I'm ready to go.
I know. Of course, I felt the same way too. And I was telling the mother, I'm like, no, we're gonna have to go in here and get Judge Judy or somebody on this case because they know that they're doing wrong simply because of the fact. And then she was complying by sending the medication. Oh, we have to do this. It was an excuse after, and I just told the principal, I said, you just don't want to be bothered. You just
Yeah.
don't want to be bothered. That's just all what it is. Oh no, in all of the IEP meetings, they never no resolution, none. They went. I think she went to an IEP meeting every other week, and then when they couldn't understand the fact she had surgery and things like that, they still was, they did not want to. And then they even here, Le Children's Hospital is the highest in the land. That's a very, very high medical pediatric, and they was like, look, there is no reason for you all to send this kid to the house. All of the doctors, and they overrode what the doctor had told them. And so I'm like, okay, well, we're in the business of taking care of children, so of course we care. No, you can't care, because if you did, it wouldn't have drug out so long like this. Stacy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and one thing I just always say to parents, the IEP stands for an individual education plan. So what does that mean? It's not cookie cutter. It's not just 20 pages of paper that somebody put together. The child that's in front of you, that's a legal document for the school district now to figure out how to educate the individual child in front of them. And so I do tell parents a couple of things. You want to make sure your requests are always in writing. That is a big piece that parents miss. Having verbal conversations is not the same as putting your requests in writing.
And in an email, so you have a record.
I was going to say, you make copies, right? You can send it certified. You make sure that you hold on to that with dated times, things, who you spoke to. You start to keep records, because that's important. Also, making sure that you educate yourselves. I know we're talking about schools educating, but here's the thing, they can't argue the law with you. And even the advocacy groups and things like that, when they start getting involved, the first thing they say is, here's the law, right? So helping parents to say, understanding educational law, understand what you have a right to and what your child has under that IEP. I have said to people, throw out the IEP direct programs, throw out the cookie cutter programs. Who is the child in front of you? Let's start from the beginning. What do they need in math? What do they need in science? What do they need to be able to stay in the building? What do they need to be able to get on the school bus? Because that's part of even getting that kid there, right? So even we were talking earlier about the sensory needs. Maybe my kid can't sit in the cafeteria, but school, you're going to provide a space. Maybe it is the nurse's office to sit and have lunch in a way that works for that student. So really understanding interventions and accommodations, even on that plan, are to be individual to what your student needs, not what they think is needed. And so that really is important for parents to continue to advocate for educating their child. One thing Janet said, if it is determined that your child cannot be maintained, then there's still supposed to be a level of educational services provided to you free. The district is supposed to cover that. And that's important for parents to understand. If they say we can't educate you in our doors in our building, then they're supposed to provide a comparable educational placement at cost to the district, not to the parent, for their child.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Free and appropriate public education, FAPE,
Absolutely.
is the law of the land. And by denying that child FAPE, they've really, illegal. The other thing to think about is there's a great parent advocacy group. I happen to have the book next to me. It's called Rights Law. And this is a group, you can go to rightslaw.com, I think, or .org, I'm not sure, but this is a group for parents, by parents. This book has, everything you could want to know, but it's actually easier on the website because you can click on the issue. But again, with that denial of FAPE, there's, in our state, it would go through the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. You would bring your case to them for denial of FAPE. The other area is the Federal Office of Civil Rights, the Education Division. A complaint can be filed also through them. So parents actually have a lot of rights, but if they don't know, and if they're not, I'm not English as a first language, they're not feeling educated. School is intimidating to parents.
Right.
A lot of us grew up with, going to the principal's office was scary. So parents are having that same reaction. Who am I to fight with this, Dr. So-and-so,
Right, right,
master's degree, so-and-so. But it's
right.
so important to get the word out that parents have so many rights if they're able to access them.
Right, right, and that's what the investigator had mentioned to the mom, that it was like 4 or 5 civil rights were, kind of violated and what have you. But when we went to the last IEP meeting, I think it was last week, they were sitting up there like they was on Mount Rushmore, like they have not done anything wrong. And that is what the sad thing about it is that sometimes people, they feel that if the parent does not know, then they feel that they have the right to drive the train the way that they see fit, because all of this was at first was based upon them. Their, well, we was lucky to get this new educator, because at first it was another educator started sending him home last year. Then of course she quit, and then here comes another one. Oh, we was lucky to get her. Okay, this is not about her. We're talking about education. This is not about who you hired. That we don't have anything to do with that. Oh, but she has a little child too. Oh, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about the law. You idiot. Let me go ahead on and put it out there like that. You idiot. And I think they know, but they thought that we didn't know. That's just what that was. They know what they supposed to do and what they don't supposed to do. They didn't think that we knew. And once I kind of got tired of that, and that was kind of long. We sometimes people have, like I do, and the mom and my son have the patience just like Job. And that was a little bit too long. And I'm like, okay, now all of a sudden, since this new educator came in, and she just told you she just come out of a trauma and things like that, and then you still sending him, okay, then no, we need to go to phase 2. And then they was like, okay, here in Tennessee, the third phase, they will allow a judge to come out, but the judge is a special education judge that comes out, but the school have to agree to be able to have the arbitration. I'm like, really? No. Well, no judge, no, the school shouldn't have to agree to anything, but according to them, that's that's the law. So some things, since we got the investigator involved, some things are kind of ironing out a little bit better. So anyway, thank you all, ladies. I thank you from the bottom of your heart. You have brought so much to the table for mothers and for advocates who advocate for autism. Of course, we pray that we're going to put a disclaimer on this too. If anybody have their comments and things, they're entitled. But we certainly do not want you all to leave the show without you sharing a little bit about how the audience can be able to follow you, any books that you have published, any websites that you would like to share, and how they can follow you on social media platforms. You can do that at this time, and we'll start with Janet.
Sure. Multiple ways. I'm on LinkedIn, just under my name at Janet Ferone. I think the most beneficial way would be if folks are on Facebook to join my Facebook group, because we share a lot of resources on autism, both from autistic and allistic or non-autistic folks. So that is E2 Equity Educators. You can just put that a search in on Facebook. And then my website is www.feroneconsult.com.
Okay.
And love to connect with you.
Okay, great. Stacy?
Yep, I'm Dr. Stacy Haynes, and if you just Google Dr. Stacy, S-T-A-C-Y, Haynes, H-A-Y-N-E-S, you'll find my website. I've published several books for parenting children as well as parenting neurodiverse children. I'm usually not on social media. I tell people the best way to get in touch with me is through our websites. I do have courses that will soon be available also on raising a speaking autistic child.
Okay.
I just released a course for parents waiting for a therapist, because that's also a huge need in our communities, is that families can't find therapists for children. And so I've created an online course to help parents while they're waiting to get services for their kids.
Okay, absolutely. Everybody's not prone to social media. So, I mean, each to their own. So, but anyway, there's some information that they can be able to get and ascertain from your website. So, ladies, thank you so much for providing all of these resources. You have impacted and you have unpacked a lot for us on the show today. And then also for the audience can be able to follow you, also to be able to learn more and more about your brand and absolutely what you do. Audience, meet us back this Thursday on Women Who Rock with Success and Women Who Rock with Success Investigate. We got another case study that's coming up, and we're going to be talking about criminal law. So thank you so much once again for for putting up with me today, and then thank you so much for availing yourself to our platform.
It was a pleasure.